Another beautiful day in the neighborhood, brother. It's Monday, the best day of the week.
Yeah.
And we are live on the Kong Family Show. Welcome everybody. We have our favorite guest of the week and the month and every day. We have the Voltinator in the house today. I can't wait to hear what we get to learn today. So, good morning, brother. How the heck is everything? Did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, it was a good weekend. Anytime I get to spend time with my wife and just not have an agenda is really awesome.
Yeah, amen. I gotta love that. It's always nice being able to spend time with your sweetie. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
It was kind of funny. I was talking to the old tree topper, old Paul Nelson, and he was telling me that he said you're about the same height, about the same size as me, about the same height. I'm like, no shit, huh? Gosh, I guess his wife must be like teeny tiny because like you tower over your wife, and I was like, man, she must be like 4'2" or something.
Actually, but yeah,
How tall is she?
it's 5'2".
5'2". And
Between
how
five,
tall are you?
I'm right at 6 foot.
Oh, heck, you're way taller than I am. I'm only like 5'6". So
Oh,
I don't know. I guess old Paul, he's got a pretty bad judgment of height.
uh, Wetzel though, and Wetzel just towers over you. So
I know Wetzel's. I mean, he is a giant. It's classic. I love how he always says he's 5'20".
Yes, indeed.
Speaking of the devil, here he is in the house today with us. So good for him. You don't want to be missing out on the Voltinator.
No. I was out working on my Norwegian tan, and my glass cutter Slim Jims have had enough for the morning.
So what's the shaking today there, Mr. Rude? Can't wait to hear what you got to talk about today. All the stuff that you talk about is always so dang fascinating. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. What's shaking today, brother?
well, I've been working on a couple of different things, and I'm actually working on a presentation that I think you guys are going to tie. It's going to tie into what you're doing. I think you guys are going to be really interested in it. And it's just kind of the spiritual aspect behind thoughts and emotions and pain responses and different things. But you've been asking me for a long time to explain what it is that I actually do. And so I've tried to build a little bit of a foundation with you and your viewers. And if you would like, I've got a presentation and we can go into some of that this morning.
Sounds awesome to me. I'm tickled. I'm really, I had a gal on a gal on the show last week, Melissa, um, and she reminded me a lot of you. Just her, the things that she does because she's very much into, the electrical aspects of our bodies and our mind and gut. Uh, correlation and that kind of stuff. And I was like, man, we got to get together sometime because we need to talk about Mr. Rude. We need to talk about what he does and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I think that as we learn more, we can share more and really help. Because ultimately, I want to learn what you're doing. I want to be able to help people the same way you're helping them. And, I really want to invest in what you invested in and, hopefully start a location doing what you're doing here in the great state of Utardia. So, so got to learn, baby, got to learn. This is going to be helpful. So very on, friend.
Talking to a friend of mine last night, and we're talking about increasing the educational offerings that are available with this technology and trying to expand the reach of individuals providing the technology across the U.S. So I'm happy to have that conversation.
Yeah, I've even got one of my teammates here with in Agic. He's really intrigued, and you know, when I told him what I was trying to do eventually, he said, I'd love to invest in that with you. And you know, he's already made the wise choice of investing into a Kong machine, and he's sold one to one of his friends that had diabetes, and the key word there is had.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty exciting. And so, yeah, it's going to be, these next couple of years are going to be a whirlwind. So,
Yeah.
Buckle up.
Comes back to that slogan of change your water, change your life, right?
yeah,
Because it starts with your water, and then you start to flush the toxins out, and you get more sensitive to what you're putting into your body, and it's like, holy cow, I can't eat this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
Because you react.
It's kind of sad, you know, because like this morning I had a good friend of mine that just before Christmas, I went over for a little Christmas party and took some water over there. And her boyfriend was kind of like 3 sheets to the wind, and I made him start drinking some water, and it brought him back to life. And she told me she wanted to give our loaner machine a 2-week trial, and I just got it back and reached out to her to see if she wanted to do the trial, and she said no thanks. And I said, why'd you change your mind? And she said, well, you left me with the sample and I didn't like the way it tasted. And I was like, well, shoot, bummer. I guess there's a first time for everything, you know. And like, can I get my bag back? She said, oh, I didn't know you wanted it back. I threw that away. I'm like,
Oh my
oh,
Lord.
well, you know, whatever. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? So, oh well, I tried. So,
Well, let me get this set up here, and yeah, I've got another one that I just put on the water, and I think he's drinking it. I think we may have a little bit of detox happening, but he is drinking it.
yeah, good for him.
So,
Yeah, I had the lady that just finished using our machine. She went through more than a gallon of electrolysis enhancer in 3 weeks.
oh gosh.
She used it like crazy. I mean, I told her she should use the water. Boy, did she ever. So she's pretty excited to get her own machine here now that I had to go and take it. And I got to move it on to Bluffs, the next family. So, yeah.
I gave this guy 2 gallons of 11.5. I said, go home and experiment on your produce.
Oh, I love it. All right. Well, let's see what you got, brother.
You're saddled up and ready to ride.
Learning time is here again.
So we have had a conversation about the autonomic nervous system, yes.
Yes.
Okay. And so you guys understand the basis behind the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight or your rest or digest?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
So I was actually looking for, I thought I had a really good illustration in here. Here we go. Sorry, my computer's taking forever.
That beard is clean, dude. Clean.
Yeah, I knew I was going to be on with you guys this morning, so I wanted to have it. All right. You guys know who Dr. Carolyn Leaf is?
Never.
Say that again?
Dr. Caroline Leaf?
No.
All right. So this is one of hers. So this is just a really neat illustration that I found because she lives by a concept that I also subscribe to. And that is that if you read through the Bible about the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Eden is actually, can be said to be talking about the mind, because the battle has always been for the mind, and we're supposed to take every thought captive. And so what you see here is the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digestive system, because we're told that we're supposed to get into peace and rest, and then we're supposed to meditate on words. Over here, your toxic thinking is like your negative self-talk and constantly bashing yourself and, oh, I'm not good enough. My business is never going to take off. Why do I think I could be successful with this? The stuff that we all deal with. And I thought this was interesting because there's a huge debate right now about like my body, my choice. And if you look at a frequency chart of the frequencies of the body, you can actually see that there's a vast difference in the frequency ranges if you're experiencing love, or if you're experiencing lust, or if you're experiencing fear. And fear is pretty much on the opposite end of the spectrum as love. So let's see if we can pull this up. And I just share this because it'll help you guys with a visualization of some of the concepts that we're going to be talking about today. So your upward spiral, and this is a, the other one was a Christian chart. This is a secular chart. And so you can kind of see the correlation between the two. And on this upward spiral of emotions, you've got your contentment, your hopefulness, your optimism, your positive expectation and belief, enthusiasm, passions, love, appreciation, empowerment, joy, knowledge. And then your downward spiral starts with boredom, and then you get into pessimism and frustration, irritation, impatience. You get overwhelmed, disappointed, you start to doubt and worry, and then you blame the situation on circumstances or people or yourself, and then you get discouraged, and then you get angry, and then you've got some bitterness that's going to start developing there, and that bitterness then turns into hatred or rage or uncontrolled anger. And then you get jealous of what other people have because you don't see those same fruits in your life. You begin to feel guilty for what you've done, unworthy and insecure, and then you get stuck in fear, grief, and depression. And this is the victim mentality. And you've got to get all the way back up to get into the creation mindset. And again,
It almost,
huh?
I was just going to say, it almost feels like our society is really trending toward the victim mindset. I mean, it's just the narcissism is off the charts with respect to people blaming the world and everyone around them and in it for their circumstances. There's just no personal accountability. And you hear it from adults. You expect to hear it from children, but that's where you have the opportunity to mentor and guide them. But yeah, I just had to comment on that because this is
look at your generation. My generation, babies having babies.
Yeah.
As parents, each generation, we were responsible for the lives and the minds of the individuals that we're raising up, because those are going to be the voting politicians of tomorrow, buddy.
Yeah. And it's like, one time my son asked me, he says, Dad, he said something like, not a lot of people believe in God or whatever. And he says, how come you teach me to believe in God? And I'm like, look, bud, if I don't teach you to believe in God, the world's going to teach you not to believe in him,
Yeah.
And that's about as simple as that goes.
I've got a really cool presentation that I'm working on that goes back to this concept right here. And it contrasts neuroscience with biblical scripture.
Wow.
And so I'll give like a neurological construct of a situation, and then we go through and back it up with scripture of probably, because I take everything back to the Greek and the Septuagint and the Strong's Concordance. And so if you're ever in doubt on anything, there's a really cool resource called the Blue Letter Bible. And it's free. You can do an interlinear translation from Greek and Hebrew into English and see different meanings of words and everything else. Half of the stuff that's in that book, man, if you just read it and take it for face value, we miss it.
Wow. Hey, can I ask you a question? Could you elaborate just briefly on the definition of the sub-Ted Nugent?
Septuagint.
Septuagint?
Septuagint Bible. So Blue Letter is probably the best resource for that because it's going to, the Septuagint just comes from the Greek. And so you've got the Torah, which is translated from Hebrew, and then you've got translations into Greek, and then into Old English, and then into New English, and we've got so many translations. If you go to any of the Bible websites, you know, you can search through almost 100 translations. And so I like to go back to the original word and see how it was intended, because we can say all day long, thou shalt not take the name of your Lord in vain. And we say, oh, okay, that's great. I don't cuss very much. But you may miss the true meaning behind that scripture, because it actually says you will not carry or represent the name of your Lord in vain, which comes back to, if you're going to represent Yahweh, then your conduct needs to be fitting with the conduct of, I mean, it basically comes down to a royal priesthood, because if you look at the genealogy and where that comes back to in the line of Jacob, we're all adopted into that family, those of us who believe.
Yes.
There's a level of grace and there's a level of forgiveness that comes with that, but there's also a level of accountability in how we're going to represent ourselves and represent.
So even if you're not cussing and you're not taking the Lord's name in vain, if you're still mumbling and grumbling under your breath and you still have an attitude of deficiency or whatever, it's kind of what you're talking to. It's not reflecting.
Known by their fruit, right?
Right. Okay.
Bad tree can't produce good fruit.
Word.
Now, how deep you want to take that in your own self-reflection and spiritualization is between you and him.
You
right?
know it.
Right? So on the, now that we've got like that out of the way, parasympathetic, fight or flight, tiger's chasing me, can't poop, can't eat food, can't digest, I got to get away from this and save my life. That's fear, that's protection, right? And so we're going to have this protect, perform continuum that we're going to discuss today. And let me get my thoughts lined up here, gentlemen. And I will try and not go over today. So I'm going to use this is the New Fit training manual, and then I've got a presentation that was actually done by one of our main distributors that we're going to be working off of today. Some information in here that I wanted for you guys in relation to protect, perform. This is kind of cool. Why do we train with the newbie? Why do we train the neurological system? And this paragraph talks about the nervous system controlling everything in your body. Talks about when you stimulate muscle and soft tissue neurologically. results happen very quickly. And so whenever I talk with people, I'm always asked what we treat, and I tell them that listen, we're gonna do three things, right? We're going to help you heal faster, we're going to help you get fitter, and we're going to help you perform better. And so from a neurological standpoint, we're increasing the body's performance because we're speeding the signals that your body already sends. And then we're able to increase metabolism, both at the cellular level and up, right? And then we can speed the healing of tissues and injuries by roughly 30 to 70%. So this is what the machine is intended to be used for. Okay? And that's relaxation of muscle spasms, prevention or retardation, so we can stop or reverse atrophy in the muscles. And atrophy is just a loss of muscle tissue that can come from a lot of different sources, but usually it comes from disuse in the event of an injury. You can see it with high levels of acidity in the body where a muscle becomes inhibited, or ischemia. If you don't get enough oxygen to an area, then the muscle tissue will start to decrease. Increased blood circulation. We're gonna definitely do that. Any electrical stimulation can do this, but neuromuscular re-education is one of the big things that we have that nobody else does. And this means that we can actually take a neurological signal from the brain to the muscles. We can isolate that signal and we can repattern it. And that's one of the things that sets this technology apart. So maintaining or increasing range of motion. Again, if you look at the commonality between these things, it comes back to a frequency of a waveform that we're using. And basically the frequency that we're using, because of the way that the body interacts with it, it will kind of overload the stretch receptor of a muscle and cause the muscle to come out of spasm and elongate. So we're actually training muscles to work at length. JJ, you have a question?
No, I'm just listening in.
Okay.
Loving it so far. Very interesting.
So there's a few contraindications here, and the reason why I bring these up, some of these are more as precautions. So I've worked with clients who have cardiac pacemakers, but that usually takes a lot of red tape because you have to have it signed off by a cardiologist and usually a clinical electrophysiologist. And then we have to do certain testing where we'll actually run the machine on the person and they'll check the pacemaker for abnormal beats or interference while we do the first session. And again, all of this happens with a prescription. So one of the things that we've done is just rolled out our new software, which is a web-based portal. And it's really neat because all of our clients can see exercises that are virtually patterned out for them. So they can watch somebody do the exercise, how they're supposed to do it. They can pull up what muscles that's targeting. We can push them information about what they're going to be doing with the newbie. We can directly import videos from Facebook, and then we've got a news feed, kind of like what Facebook has. And in that news feed, we can push health and wellness information that's specific to our category, but we can also push out meal plans, and they can count their macros, track their weight, and set performance goals. And then they can try and accomplish challenges to reach those performance goals. So with our remote program, we've tried to make things a lot more comprehensive so that even if people are not able to come into the facility, but they have their own newbie at home, we can still provide a very similar experience to the individuals who are working with us remotely. So Cancers, active cancers are a no-no. Pregnancy, because there haven't been any studies done on electrical stimulation and what that does to fetuses. Shouldn't be used, again, with cancerous lesions. Stimulation should not be applied over infected or inflamed areas. But one thing that is really cool about this is I've used it to heal surgical injuries. So you can put it on a bruise or a torn muscle or tendon and it'll speed the healing of that. But also if you have a scar in an area, you can speed up the blood flow to that area and the body will actually heal it faster. There's a few other contraindications. Epilepsy is one of the big ones that I look out for. And that's just because they've got an electrical imbalance in the body that's causing a polarity shift. And whenever the polarity shifts and those neurons fire, they have a seizure. One of the clinical research case studies that I'm wanting to do on this machine, if I can find the help to do it, is actually on temporal lobe epilepsy.
That would be a heck of a thing.
It would. I've got a really neat hypothesis on how it would work, but haven't tested it yet. So we've got a preliminary evaluation, and then we go into manual muscle testing, which I use a Lafayette manual muscle testing device. And so we get an actual pounds per square inch force rating out of the muscle, and we isolate different muscles. So we test them individually, and then we can test them in a group to see how they're firing and how they're activating. If any of the muscles are not activating or any of the nervous system signals are not making it to the right area, then we use manual activation to call the brain's attention to that area and get that muscle out of protection. And then we do diagnostic feedback and scanning of the nervous system with the newbie. Scans done at 500 hertz. And then the re-education and rehabilitation is always done at 500 hertz. And we repattern and re-educate the nervous system and the musculature through exercise combined with the newbie current. After somebody goes through a rehab session, they have the ability to then take on fitness. For fitness, it's fairly simple, fairly straightforward. You have your manual activation of the targeted muscle groups, which again we do with manual therapies. And then you've got a warm-up phase, which is done at 500 hertz. You lengthen the target muscle group, and then you start working on hypertrophy, which is like super duper muscle growth. All the big time bodybuilders, Jay Cutler, Mr. Olympia from like 2006 to 2010, he won a few years in there, several. He works out with this technology. There's several celebrities that use this technology, and most of the bodybuilding world is aware of it now because it's a real unfair advantage. So after we work, we've got a cool down period, and then you're sore for 3 to 7 days. A few of the terms that we use, concentric contraction just means that it's a contraction that causes tension on your muscles and your tendons because it's going to shorten the muscle. Most people work with concentric contraction. One of the first things that I do whenever I have people come into the facility is I work with them on how to load their muscles at length. And so we'll actually put them through a number of exercises that force them to use their muscles without them being short and balled up while we're delivering the current. And so you can do a variation of, you actually have eccentric exercises. So they go through a lot of different repetitions to lengthen the muscles under load. Length of muscle has the ability to absorb force. The more force, the more muscle fiber recruitment, and the more growth because you're maximizing your potential. But I want to stop there and kind of give an analogy, because do you guys have a lot of potholes and dirt roads where you live?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So when you go driving around on dirt roads and choppy roads, what keeps your car together?
The frame?
Okay. Is the frame designed to absorb 100% of the impact?
No, your shocks.
Your shocks are. So if you think of the skeleton as the frame, the muscles are the shocks.
Giddy up.
So in order for you to pick up that box, you have to be able to neurologically be able to absorb that weight. You have to be able to transfer that, right? Your relationship with gravity. And if your body can't support the amount of weight or the amount of demand that you're trying to put on it, then the body shuts down. So if you've ever been working real hard and you feel like you just, maybe you had something real heavy or you were doing something and you lost all your strength, and that's because the body's going into a neurological protection mode. And it does that to shut down those muscles so that you don't damage something. This thing always came back to two choices: protect, perform, love or fear. Okay.
So, in essence, the manifestation of belief and faith and absolute conviction that we can heal or we can, go through this transformation is really the foundation of anything physical to come, correct? You can't go into this thinking this sucks, I can't do it, it's not going to work. It's going to be totally counterproductive, correct?
Correct. So this is something, and I've got some slides that I'm trying to build out so that I can give a visual representation of this to make more sense. But we can talk about this for a moment because you just touched on something that I think is very important. So in the beginning, right, and I may lose some people here. I really hope that I don't. It's not, I want to preface this argument by saying that it's not my intention to argue beliefs or denominations or anything like that. I'm actually one of a few people that believes that God's purpose is never accomplished by our righteous or unrighteous anger. Because God is love, and in him there is no darkness. So if you think about that, what 1 Corinthians 13 says about love, being patient and kind and long-suffering, and it keeps no record of wrongs, and God is the actual embodiment of love. It doesn't say that God loves, it says God is love. And then in my Bible, it says that God so loved the world that he sent Jesus to die for our sins because God's sovereign. And so he's got Levitical law that was set forth. And whenever I look through that, it's like, how long did it take the Israelites to start worshiping the golden calf? Moses wasn't up there 30 days, and they're already smelting everything down, and, and so it comes back. We think that we're so far removed because we've got science and modern medicine, and we've got our constitution, our government, and everything else.
Indoctrination.
Yeah. It all comes back to the same thing. And I'm going to argue that at a base level, neurologically, that comes down to love and fear, or love and the absence of love.
Nice.
So this is kind of cool, I think, but I'm a little bit of a weirdo, I've been told.
Join the party, pal.
If you look at this tree could signify the two choices that we're presented with in every situation. And one choice is peace. And the other choice is we can focus on the storm. And if we focus on the storm, it's going to create basically like a tornado. I think I have my stress tornado here. I do not have my stress tornado. So I will pull up PowerPoint real quick because this is good. We won't spend a lot of time on this, but I do want to touch on it. And while that's loading, do you guys see this?
Yes, sir.
So what that is actually neural tissue. And this is an example of how neural tissue grows in the brain. What do these look like?
They look like flowers or plants.
Yeah, so think of these as like the trees, because
Yeah.
dendrite, that's actually where it came from, is tree. And if you have negative thoughts, what you're seeing down here, the weeds, are actually negative thought patterns.
Wow.
What?
So if you're supposed to like cultivate a mind of peace and rest, and you're constantly spun up in this panic, fear, like fight or flight area, then you're never going to be able to get into that area of rest, which is why I say if you're not dreaming, you're not healing. Because REM sleep requires parasympathetic activity.
Wow.
Talk about the pineal gland we have, and we've had conversations about fluoride, which I'm glad that Sam Tran gave you guys the filter information on the fluoride, because I knew that there was one. My clients in Australia have to use that because they're having water trucked in and they're getting fluoride in their water quality analysis. But the pineal gland, whenever that calcifies, it hardens, right?
Right.
And once it's hardened, you can use it actually as an identifier, like a marker on an X-ray, an anatomical marker, because it shows up kind of similar to how bone would, because of calcium. But if it's calcified, then your higher level functions, including a lot of your spiritual function, are depleted. And so that's not me saying, I'm going to explain myself very clearly, because I have a few people that try and take my words out of context. That's not saying that we are God, or that God is a pocket divinity that we carry around, or that, you know, God is inside you and we're all God. That's saying that we have the ability to tap in to something bigger than ourselves. Like, we have the opportunity to come before the creator of the universe, and then we can co-create and we can fellowship in that place of peace and rest. That's how the human body was designed. And so we were given a choice from the start, like, choose you which day you will serve, right? So what happened? They were given the garden, and they walked with God in the cool of the day. And then the accuser came and tempted them to say, oh, is that really what he said? And then doubt and fear creeps in. And the weeds start to grow. And once that doubt and fear and insecurity creeps in, then we're no longer single-minded, looking at life with one eye. Now we're all over here darting back and forth, and we can't focus on anything. And that's because when you're stressed, you're in that state of fight or flight. The way that it affects the hippocampus in the brain, it reduces your ability to think rationally and to plan, prioritize. Coffee's pouring coffee. Onion water.
Hey, Shawn, can you mute yourself?
All right, so choose this day whom you will serve. I called this presentation Sharing the Mind of Christ, just because I think it's a really cool concept. That's what scripture says that we're supposed to do. So my goal here is to help you guys develop an awareness of the mind, develop an awareness of the effect of your thoughts on your mental, spiritual, and your physical being, because we're triune. I mean, we can't just look at this thing three-dimensionally and close ourselves off to what's going on around us, because we'll miss a big part of the picture. I would say the biggest part. And so one of the biggest things that I want to do is help people gain an insight on their ability to control their thoughts and improve their quality of life and health through that. A vast majority of disease in the Christian world, we look at it as coming back to having spiritual roots. And modern medicine, Western medicine, has actually come back and said, oh no, we've got diagnoses for all these things, but I'll show you guys something that's pretty profound that might change the way that you think about that also. The power of our thoughts and our words have power. And regardless of whether or not we're paying attention, if you have a thought of fear about a specific situation in your life, and you start thinking thoughts of fear about that situation, then your body's going to release neurosignals and chemicals, and it's going to fill receptor sites and create a reality for you based on the thoughts that you're allowing into your mind. So if you think about a time in your life where you had a scary experience. Now, this could be a family member that we had a falling out with. It can be a physical injury. It can be, a business deal. You hear people who have had business partners that say, I'll never take on a business partner again. And it's because they've had an experience that their mind has created a memory for, because there was elevated emotion and a bad experience, and their body, their mind goes, boom, let's set a protective mechanism so that we don't go here again. So what we talk about can be seen as kind of complex, but it's really, really simple. And then how to guard our hearts and our minds from destructive patterns of behavior. I'll let Wetzel catch up here. So, Shawn, I don't know if you cut out altogether, if you just kind of turned your camera off, but
I've been listening. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about the mute. I had to water the plants.
So I'm gonna show you something really cool about the concept of disease having spiritual root. So what I am doing here is providing inspiring teaching that hopefully renews and restores relationship with Jesus. I want to open blind eyes to the lies that they've accepted as truth. And I want to be able to combine biblical truths with interesting discoveries in neuroscience and quantum science. My goal is that faith would arise in individuals. So my entire goal here is that you guys can take a presentation that we talk about and walk away feeling like, hey, I'm empowered. I have the power to take these thoughts captive, and I have the power to choose which direction my life is going to go in. And we see that all the time with people who just say, you know what, this is not my disease. It's not my diagnosis. I don't claim it. I don't own it. It's not of me and it's not of him, and I want it out. And then they just start believing to that effect.
That's crazy. That is so interesting. Is I have a cousin who she actually she swears that's how she got rid of her cancer, by doing exactly what you just said, by, you know, becoming closer to Christ and you know, basically exactly that. I mean, and that's what she says. That's how I got rid of my cancer, and I don't doubt it for a second, not even for the slightest second. And
Nope.
you know, interestingly enough, she was also going to a local practitioner, chiropractor or whatever, and getting some naturopath doctor, and she was getting Kangen water from them during that same time frame. But that's what she says. That's how I got rid of my cancer.
Absolutely. So I've got people who have been paralyzed for 25 years. I mean, yeah, we've got really cool technology, but the commonality that I've seen in the years that I've been doing this, and I started in, gosh, it's been 2016 now, because I injured myself in 2015. The people who come in and they have really good attitudes and they're optimistic and they're believing that, you know, this has the power to help them. It's the placebo effect, right? If you want it to work, it will. The difference is, like, you are the placebo.
Yeah.
That's a Dispenza quote. And while I may not agree with 100% of what the guy says, I mean, he's super smart. And that one comes back to just basics. Like, we have a choice. You can choose today whether you're going to believe this stuff or whether you're going to go, man, that guy's a quack. I'm not going to waste my time and click off. But you may learn something that could change your life, because it's changed mine.
Yeah.
I didn't used to believe this stuff.
No, and again, it speaks directly to the family member whom I love dearly that had his back snapped 17 years ago. He's now lived longer in his, I hate using the word crippled, but in his current state. And he's blessed enough to be able to walk on sticks. He uses the canes with the handles and stuff. And that gives me absolute hope of there is function. There is, you know, he's quads. He can lift his, you know, to some degree. I just would see something like this to be nothing short of a miracle, you know, based on what we've talked about thus far. And we talk about people being paralyzed for that many years that are having profound success with it, you know. Couple that on top of just a real sincere, earnest belief that God can help him heal and utilize, you know, this technology. To me, that's the thing that I wish we were in the same community. I'd just take him to you immediately, you know. Yeah. But anyway, that's why it's so personal for me to hear that, because I seriously believe that he will be able to walk without sticks before it's all said and done. But, you know, 17 years later, there has to be a real commitment and conviction in the process to begin with, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, you know, Ian, that's one of the reasons, I mean, this whole discussion is a good part of the reason why I'm so curious. I mean, not only because of my own knee, that I really believe this can really help the development and I can keep my OEM part, as I love to say. I have a friend who, when he was a promising athlete, and he and his friends were having some fun one day at a pool party, and his best friend dared him to jump into the pool with his hands by his side, and he did. He jumped into the shallow end of the pool, dove into the shallow end of the pool, and snapped his neck and turned himself into a, you know, he's paralyzed from the neck down. And he's been in a bed for probably 15 years now. And I was doing a job recently, and I went, that was right by their house, so I stopped in, and I told them, you know, I really want to introduce you to this, because I think that if there is anything that could potentially help him and get him out of that bed, that this is it. But, you know, like you say, it has to be it has to be rooted in the thought process, where right now him and his dad, they don't have any belief whatsoever that this could help them. And if they have that belief, then they're right. It can't. At least that's the way I feel about it. You know, the old saying, if you believe you can, you're right. If you believe you can't, you're right.
And I think a lot of it also comes back to, you know, self-preservation and that sense of self, which when somebody has a catastrophic injury like that, or somebody's diagnosed with a condition, then automatically the self is under attack. And so people become very self-centered and self-preserving. I know I did, because the body senses that something is out of whack. And so it starts to go into this spun up cycle of cortisol release and stress response and, you know, panic, because there's something that has caused injury. There's a perceived threat, right? And so regardless of whether that injury is still there or something is healed and we're left with same level of function, less function, tissue heals, soft tissue heals, but the nervous system remembers. And it does so to protect us. So again, that's where prayer and meditation and tapping into that, getting close with God and recognizing that God has a plan, we're all part of it. And if we start to think that this thing is just about us, then we're probably getting too big for our britches and we're kind of out of the swing of things, because we're affecting generations and we're a part of the big picture. We're a part of an ecosystem. So, importance of muscle lengthening. We talked about that. There's a few terms that I talk about. First, compensation. Think about this as like, if I can change your position. So it's a level where the nervous system reaches a breaking point and it moves soft tissue out of position to compensate. So I'm literally causing muscles to contract spontaneously. Paul Nelson could probably talk to you about that. First sensation is basically where you feel a tap or a twitch. And so I always tell people there's first sensation is where you feel the current. First contraction is where the muscle will start to kind of vibrate. And then first compensation is where I'm going to change your position. And we work between first compensation and max compensation. So I always tell people we shoot for about a 7 or an 8. I want somebody to really get depleted with every rep that we do. But I don't want it to be too much that their nervous system stops being able to compensate and function, because then we're going to entrain a compensation pattern, because remember, we're actually re-educating the nervous system. Morning, Dan. I see you hopped on here. So we use yielding isometric holds. We use eccentric exercises. There's several different ranges that we can do. 500 hertz lengthens. If you're using lower frequencies, you can actually create hypertrophy in the muscles. There's a lot of that we go into in our classes. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it today. Strength performance loss. So let's get into this stuff, because I wanted to talk to you guys about some neurological concepts. So again, the Nibby is an FDA class 2 device, which means that somebody has to have a prescription. This is not a conflicting business model with Enagic. And this is not something like the Beamer where people can get into this and, oh, I've got a Beamer, I'm going to refer one to you. You actually have to be a licensed practitioner to use this device. And then in order to be an affiliate for the device, there's a few of us that have been given kind of the reins to talk about the technology. And we're very grateful to have the opportunity to do that, because it's highly regulated. So the purpose of training with NewFit is enhanced muscle and neurological recruitment. So we can get more exercise and more performance with less risk of injury and actually less external load on the body. We can turn up the current and turn up the demand on the nervous system. And it looks like we're adding weight to the body when you're doing reps. And it doesn't matter if you're using a dowel rod. I can make a dowel rod feel like 300 pounds if we've got the electrodes in the right place and we're sending the right signals at the right intensity. So this is kind of the bridge from rehab back into fitness training. Because if somebody has an injury, we can speed up healing of the injury, and then we can get them back into a performance mode while we're still healing tissues, because they're not having to use heavy weight. And so we can still stress the system and get the same metabolic effects from the exercise like they're using heavy weight, even when they're just using the machine.
Wow.
Precision of activation, so we can target specific areas in the body and we can make it safer. That comes back to eliminating compensation patterns. So if somebody is walking incorrectly, they're putting pressure on the wrong place on their foot. That can then transfer up to the knee, which can transfer to the hip, which can transfer up the back and the posterior kinetic chain, all the way up to the neck. There's a line that travels around the body that can affect your ability to balance and walk. So looking at this neurologically is really, really important. Again, we've talked about cell voltage in great detail. You know that you're a 120 millivolt machine. You're supposed to have 120 millivolts of charge in your cell. Start to lose that voltage, you start to lose the amplitude, then your body starts to malfunction. Cell voltage is very important. But here's, again, you know, you look at the tree. You've got, this is not the picture that I was going for, the other tree was, but you've got the storm over here, your pain, weakness, tension, fatigue, startle reflex, and your tunnel vision. And then over here, you've got the peace. This is your strength, your power, your endurance, flexibility, peripheral vision, clarity of thought and word. And so I argue that this comes back to parasympathetic and sympathetic balance within the body. So another example of that would be the basics of stress physiology. So your body is encountered with a stressor and you're supposed to rise to meet the challenge, and you maintain that level of activity. And then once the event is over, you've escaped the tiger, you come home, and cave woman wants to have dinner and make cave babies. But if you're still thinking about the tiger, you're not going to be able to perform those functions, because your rest and digest comes back to your feed and breed. And so you're not going to be thinking about those types of things if you're still stuck in this fight or flight state. So what we try and do is retrain the body so that we're actually going to give you a stress impulse. Your body is going to adapt, and then we're going to train you to become calm in the presence of the stressor.
Wow.
Okay. So this just talks about stress response, allostasis. Homeostasis says that everything likes to be baseline. Allostasis says that if you're encountered with a stimulus that is impactful enough to cause change, your body will adapt to the stimulus and it will rise to the demand that you place on it. So specific adaptation to impose demand is what we're talking about there. I hope that's clear as mud. Overtraining and supercompensation, we won't go into that. So yeah, normalization of water and ionic balances. So we've talked a little bit about ion channels, cell voltage, cell structures. Everything requires adaptation to work. And on the base level, that comes back to the nervous system and how it's sending the signals, whether it's sending those signals effectively or ineffectively. So we could look at strength and conditioning as being really a neurological process. Yes, you have to build muscle, but if your nervous system is not trained to be able to send those signals, then you're going to fatigue. So we adapt to what we're doing in these areas. This comes back to the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, and they have to have balance. Your body position and the muscles being used. The body will get better at whatever it's repeatedly asked to do. If that's sitting, leaning forward in a desk chair, looking at a laptop, then that's the position that you're going to be stuck in. If you get out and walk and exercise and run, then the body will get better at using those muscles, and you'll develop a metabolism for running. Thought and emotional patterns. Site of adaptation in the muscles. So you've got your contractile fibers, which is your strength. You have your sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is speed and anaerobic endurance. And then you've got your mitochondria, which is your aerobic endurance. So runners will go from aerobic with oxygen metabolism into without oxygen metabolism, which is why they'll carb load for energy. Right? Okay, breathing is one of the biggest things that we work on. And I want to encourage you guys at some point, try and stand against a wall with the back of your head, your shoulder blades, your butt, and your heels touching the wall. So standing up real straight and tall, and try and breathe into your belly through your nose. So when you take a breath in through the nose, you're trying to drop the diaphragm down and push the belly out. And then whenever you exhale through the nose, you're trying to suck your belly button to your spine and push your diaphragm up real high to get all the air out of your lungs. And by doing this, it activates that parasympathetic nervous system response. You'll also, by standing up against the wall, be able to straighten your posture. And so if you've got some of that forward lean, the rounded shoulders, by doing this, you're going to lengthen out the core and you'll be able to correct some of your posture. You may notice that your fingertips tingle while you do it. We've talked about poop in the past. Spend a lot of time on poop, not because I enjoy playing with it. That's actually one of the reasons I became a paramedic instead of a nurse, is because I didn't want to deal with poop as much. I had no clue what I was getting myself into.
Hey, Ian, I got a question for you, just because that first type of poo right there in that little chart.
Yeah.
Which that first one looks like deer poop or something, elk poop.
Yes.
Well, I've got a friend who he had a skydiving accident and broke his back, and now he poos like that.
Yes. It's because his digestion is incredibly slowed down. And so that will probably have something to do with the area of the spinal cord that he injured himself at, because we have different nerve pathways that come off of the spine that help different organs function. And so if he's had an injury to that level of the nervous system, then it'll cause things to move slower through the digestive tract.
And that's why it ends up coming out like that. Because he's a really good friend of mine, and he can walk and everything. He's still skydiving and all that stuff. And, you know, I call myself the king of poo, because on river trips, I'm always carrying all the poo. And I get a lot of chance to see what everybody's doing, and, you know, during the trip. But, yeah, his poo, it's always these round nuggets.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had his wife and him utilize our loaner machine when we first got it, and unfortunately they never even used it. They never drank it, never really drank enough water, never. And it, you know, they didn't end up wanting to get a machine because it said it never helped. And I said, well, you know, it can't really help if you don't drink it.
If
And
he's
Darwinism is alive and well.
yeah, but you know, one of the things I really thought would happen is that I really figured that it would help his poo.
that's
Um, and
seriously dehydrated bowel movement. So I would expect that he's not going to see results within the 2 weeks that we would normally see. It would probably take closer to 1 or 2 months of drinking the water consistently.
yeah, they actually had the machine for a little over a month, but anyway, you know, when I went to get it back, I found out that they weren't even really drinking it. He was drinking maybe 16, 24 ounces a day is all. And he's pretty good sized boy, you know, he should have been drinking a couple gallons a day. And, but you know, whatever, they're still looking and they're still curious and whatever. So we'll see. Maybe something like this, maybe you might just comment to that, because maybe something like that might be, if I can get Chalet, his wife, to actually listen to this part of this presentation, that maybe it might be something that she says, you know, I mean, that part about the poo, that's going to ring to her. She's going to see those little nuggets and go, yep, that's how my sweetie poos. You know, and you know, sometimes that's what it takes. You know, it takes a person hearing something that's you know, like for me, I ignored this for 6 months at least, thinking it was just stupid, and then finally that incredible story came along that switched my brain cell. And maybe what you have to say and what you're showing here might be the thing that switches her over and switches them over. I don't know, but there's only one way to find out, and that's to try. So
There's a reason why I incorporated Kangen water in our fitness regimen, right? And it's more than just hydration, because they're actually calcium channel receptors that we found, those ion channels. They're calcium channels that activate neurological and muscular tissue. And they're designed for speed. So if you're wanting to build your neurological efficiency, then it makes sense that you would be drinking water that has minerals in it. And with us being electrical beings, it would make sense that we're going to drink water that has electrical charge, because we're supposed to, if we maintain the voltage in our cells and you maintain those electrons, then your cells will stay healthy. If the outside of that cell goes from a negative to a positive and stays that way, then you got problems, and that cell's going to start replicating in a manner that is going to make his neighbors very unhappy, right?
yeah,
He's the guy that parks his car on the lawn and plays loud music all hours of the night, and then the trash in his yard starts piling up in the trash of everybody else's yard, because he's a free radical and he's going to do what he wants to do. So if we put it like that. So, but then you've got these little hexagonal six-sided aquaporins inside each cell. And if you're trying to get 15 to 20 water molecules through there in a 5-sided cluster, then you're trying to put a square peg in a round hole.
yeah,
So only some is going to get through. And if you're expecting your water to come from coffee or Mountain Dew, caffeine's a diuretic. It's not even getting into the cell. What's actually getting into the cell is what you don't want.
yeah. So fascinating. It really is. All of this is just such an incredibly fascinating subject. And, you know, I don't know, somehow I think I've always known deep down inside something about this kind of stuff, you know, that there's something to all this. Just never had anybody really put it together and like pinpoint it. And, you know, so it's just really is. It's cool stuff. I'm a whole
Well, just the common sense that it touches on. Like you said, we're electrical beings. Doesn't it make sense that we drink in electrical water? I mean, that, just the way you said that just had me go, poof, what? It's that simple.
I love that one.
I
Make sure
mean,
you throw that out on a quote the good doctor.
Yeah. I've gotten a whole nice little slew of quotes this morning. That's one thing about the Voltinator. He's always throwing out all kinds of good stuff to think about and say.
you guys have had like a muscle spasm that won't go away, right?
Si, senor.
So if you think about that, Paul Nelson was on. He could tell you what the newbie feels like. But when you slow down your impulses, we can do low frequencies that send a twitch signal, a vibration signal. Okay. And then we can increase the tension on the muscle. And as the twitches start to fuse together, you create tetany in the muscle. And so I've actually got people that will come to me for a protocol that we have because they're going to the lake and they want their muscles to look really big and full. And so we'll move the pads all the way around and we stimulate the nervous system all over the body and basically just give them like a global pump so that they can look good in their swimsuit and feed their vanity. But it works for people who have knee issues also. The reason I bring that up is because that's how we train people to get out of that chronic state of, my knees crunch every time I bend down and I'm constantly walking in pain. We turn those muscles back on and allow them to contract eccentrically and elongate. And then the shocks are working properly and you're no longer transferring that force to the frame when you're going about town.
Yeah, that's something that you might find interesting and about my situation is like my left calf, the diameter of my left calf compared to my right calf. My right calf is about 2 inches bigger in diameter than my left.
We call that atrophy. Now, the funny thing about that is you use both of your legs, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I use both of my arms and I've trained myself to use both arms equally because my right arm will lose muscle faster than my left arm. And so I've actually got definition where in my left arm where my right arm is visibly smaller because of the CRPS. Mm-hmm. So I've got a neurological injury that happened in my shoulder and they did all this diagnostic testing and said we can't find anything wrong with you, but I've still got all this stuff going on. And then I got the traditional, oh, well, it's in your head. It's psychosomatic. We're not actually going to treat that because we can't find what's going on. So it's in your head. The issue is, technically pain is always in your head, but we can't say that it's mental and ignore a physical manifestation within the body because that's still going to cause, you've still got an area of the neurology that is malfunctioning. So trigger points usually come from an area of neurological inefficiency, or they could come from ischemia. So if you don't have enough oxygen to the tissue and the tissue starts to kind of become what we call ischemic and then it'll shut down. There's a principle in neuroscience that says if a muscle can't contract in its entirety, it won't contract at all. And so what you end up with is one leg gets more tired more quickly because you're using accessory muscles to compensate for a muscle that's not able to properly activate. And thereby you transfer half again to twice as much force into the other leg to carry yourself. That's what we call a compensation pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely the situation with me. I definitely use my right leg more predominantly because it flat out, plain and simple, it friggin' hurts. It hurts to walk. It hurts to put weight on that left leg. It hurts to to exercise that leg. You know, if I'm trying to do exercises to strengthen the muscles around it, it just flat out hurts. And so it's hard to do that when it hurts. I got to hopefully be able to figure out here as time goes by how to be able to get past that so that I can develop that muscle again. And, you know, and that's why I'm so excited about learning about this and eventually being able to, you know, get to where I can utilize what you're doing to fix myself. I really truly want to keep my OEM part. I don't want to have them chop my leg in half and put a piece of steel in there or whatever the heck, you know. I want to keep what God gave me if I can, and it seems to me that it's very much possible. And so
put together a few sessions for you guys, and we can just plan it out where I could take a few days and we could do a special Kong family show. Everybody could watch you guys get zapped.
I would love to do that. That would be really cool. You know, that was ultimately when it's all said and done, I hope to be able to do that where we can actually do a live show and show people, you know, because I think it's awesome to teach everybody this is what we're doing basically. And then once we get hopefully to a certain point, we can actually now it's time to actually show it happening and show the results, you know, do measurements, whatever. So it goes from being something that's written down on paper to something that's actually happening, you know, kind of like our meeting to write down our goals. You know, if you don't write them down, if you don't look at them, then most likely they're probably not going to happen. And so this is kind of a similar thing as far as I can tell. And that would be really cool to be able to, you know, first off, educate people about what's going on and then actually show it in action. And that I'm thinking that the more that we can get out there, the more that's going to help explode your business. And, you know, ultimately it's all about changing lives for the better. And, you know, we've got the ultimate tool for doing that, in my opinion. And I think what you're doing just complements the heck out of it. And, you know, the thing is, brother, is that just the whole concept of being paralyzed. You know, when Mike jumped into the pool and broke his neck, that was a really traumatic thing for his family, for his friends, and everybody, you know. And man, would that ever be a neat thing to be able to get him out of that bed. But he has to believe it.
Well, I mean, like we've said, we're given a choice, right? And so there's a lot of people that I get that say, I don't know if this is going to work for me or not, but I've got to try it. And I would argue that if we never try, then we'll never know.
Amen. Amen, brother.
Well, in the infinite words of the Jedi Master Yoda, do or do not, there is no try.
Very profound.
Amen.
Very
Yeah, brother. Well, I love it. I'm looking forward to having this meeting again here in 2 weeks and you know, digging deeper and whatever it is, you know, whatever you want to share with us and show us and that kind of thing, step by step. It's such a blessing that you're going to take the time to come and visit with us twice a month. I'm so excited about that. The Mondays, the second and fourth Monday of the month just aren't going to come fast enough, brother. Because I love it. I absolutely love visiting with you. The stuff that comes out of your brain cell is so fascinating and so interesting to learn. And I'm really looking forward to it. This is going to be a serious life changer, not only for me personally, but for a lot of other people around the world that are just begging and praying every day for something like this, and they just don't know that it exists. And so
what I'm hoping is that we can go through a series. I want to show you a couple of slides here real quick. Because I want to go into some of this stuff with you guys. I think it'll really help you in your business. I think it'll help people that you're trying to talk to. And so this is the slide that I was talking about earlier. So if we go to the Greek lexicon and we look up devil or diablos in the Greek, you see that it comes from a spiritual root, and it's prone to slander, accusing falsely. And the word talks about Lucifer being the accuser of the brethren. And so then if we look at the multiplying effect of stressors, I thought this was a really neat example, because you end up with this thought that didn't come from you, but it's there and it's negative. So you can say that it's not in love. It didn't come from God. That creates social anxiety and starts to affect your social skills and how you relate to others. Then you end up in a stress cycle where your energy starts to get zapped because you're in fight or flight and you're stuck in this red line state. You develop tension within the body because your muscles that control your sympathetic nervous system, your stress, are in the top of the front of your pecs and your traps, which is why everybody says that they carry their stress on their shoulders, because that's where the sympathetic muscle batteries are for that area in the body. That turns into a thought pattern, which turns into a behavior. So you have worry and a distorted perception, and then you're fixating on the things that are going wrong, and you start, your perception of how other people see you starts to change, and the perception of how you see yourself starts to change, and we become very anxious and fearful and negative. And that cycle is something that I want to see people reverse, because it comes down to a condition of the heart, basically. And I want to finish this out with one more thing. And we talked about what I am trying to do. I want to talk about what I'm not doing. We're never going to offer medical advice, a diagnosis, or a treatment on one of these calls. I'm always trying to educate people to the options that are out there. I'm not trying to, this says change the word. I am trying to change the world. I'm not trying to change the word of God. There are a lot of doctrines that are out there right now. There's a lot of people that are trying to tap into law of attraction and a bunch of different things. And so I'm just going to come out and say from the very start, if anyone, Book of Revelations, Revelation 22 says this, if anyone adds to them, God will add him to the plagues described in this book. And if anyone takes away the words from this book of prophecy, God will take away his share in the tree of life and the holy city, which is described in the book. I would rather be wrong in my literal interpretation of the book than to be wrong and add to the book or take away from the book by spiritualizing. So all I'm ever going to do is try and bring my world experience and the truth that is in Scripture together for you guys. And I realize that I may lose a demographic of people if I go that route, but again, we're supposed to do everything in love. And so if we're sharing truths and we're not arguing with pitchforks and torches, then I think we can all get along and share truth and see the commonality.
I can dig it.
And we'll try and keep it around an hour for you guys. That way we don't bleed over.
Word.
Awesome, brother.
Thank you, guys.
It's amazing, though, because an hour seems like 10 minutes.
I can't believe it. It's already an hour. We're almost an hour and a half into this. It's just good grief.
Oh man, we and I don't have to hop off here, so I'd love to keep talking with you guys. Like I said, I don't want to blow your people over, but I've got some stuff that the Holy Spirit's just been revealing to me, even in what I do, and I think it's going to be really profound for a lot of people.
You know, for me, I look at it like, I look at the state of the world. All we're being fed is division. All we're being fed is disdain. I mean, you look at our politics, man. There was a time when, Republicans and Democrats would stand next to each other at the fence like Tim the Tool Man Taylor and Wilson, and they'd talk. Now they're throwing middle fingers. They're throwing dog poop from the other ends of their fences. And it's just the civility is lost. And to me, you start looking, at some of that stuff, and you'd probably speak to it more directly, but, tribulations or whatever, just in terms of the time period we're at, I think this stuff right here is critical, because without having any frame of foundation, people are they're just gobbling up all these lies, gobbling up all these mistruths, all these manipulated realities, and they want to believe them because it suits their narrative. It's easy. We want to go with what's easy for us. And I never learned anything about my character when it was easy. I never found anything about, just my mechanisms of, survival or overcoming. You're never doing that when you're in a pool in Cancun with a Mai Tai in your hand on a floaty, you're never really learning. It's when you're on your back and you're facing adversity. And if you're not stopping and evaluating what's going on around you, we're just oblivious. And I think too many people are oblivious. People don't want the truth. They want whatever suits their narrative due to convenience. And as much as this may challenge a non-believer, if you will, then so be it. Because at the end of the day, at least you're giving them an option that they might not have otherwise considered. And, in all honesty, I've always kind of been the mindset of, I'd rather be, how do I want to say it, wrong as a Christian than right as an atheist? Or right as a Christian than wrong as an atheist is what I'm trying to say. So I just err on the side of, that's pragmatic to me. It's practical, and I think this stuff here, being able to, to talk about the neurosciences, all they're doing is they're just copying scripture. You look at all these guys, scientists for years. Oh man, there's a finite number of stars in this universe, in the sky. And last 15, 20, they finally just conceded and said, well, we can't count them all. They're just infinite. They're endless. Well, it's funny how that's been claimed for several thousand years, and the non-believers want to continue to, play their godlikeness to the world, and that's it. We all those people have a God complex to some degree. And I don't know. I just think this kind of conversation, this topic, I think is really critical, particularly in today's times. So, yeah, it was kind of maybe a little blathery, but hopefully I stayed contextually in what we're talking about.
You exactly said what we're talking about. And I bring up the book Rockefeller Medicine Men a lot, because whenever I went to medic school, I mean, that was religion. The way that you're taught to learn these drugs and these interactions, and you learn the chemistry of how the body works and how the drugs are interacting with the body, but it's never really put in your mind that this stuff is harmful to people. You are, however, taught that people are addicts, and so you need to be careful if you're going to give medicine. You may not want to become a Candyman medic, is what we called it, because you're going to create addicts, or you have the potential to create addicts. What I didn't realize whenever I went through school is that OxyContin is one molecule off from heroin.
Good Lord.
And when that medicine was first put on the market, it was marketed as, I think it was a 12 or 24-hour medication. I believe it was 12. And they said, oh yeah, one pill, 12 hours, kind of like, the Aleve all-day relief. And so the doctors come back to the reps and they said, well, our patients are saying that the pills aren't working for 12 hours. They're not lasting that long. and they were faced with a choice. So they went back to the individuals who formulated the drug and talked with them, and reps talked with these people. And the general consensus was basically that it's marketed as a 12-hour medication. So you can't change the interval, change the dose, up the dose. And that medication was designed for post-surgical acute pain, not long-term pain. And so we've got, I do not argue. I've had so many people try and accuse me of abhorring medicine, and I don't. I worked in emergency medicine for over a decade, and I saw the benefits. Like, if you have a distracting fracture in your arm, you're going to be so grateful for a paramedic that is willing to dose you with fentanyl. Like, give me 150 micrograms, just load me up, knock me out with Versed before you move the arm, because you're in that much pain. So there is a purpose, and it does a lot of good. But I think where we've gotten in trouble is, number one, we don't recognize that medicine has spiritual roots. So literally, if you come back to, again, in the Greek, and you go to the word pharmakia or pharmakon, it talks about a druggist or a sorcerer. And so there's all this stuff that's coming out about, Planned Parenthood and harvesting aborted tissue from babies. And then there was this conspiracy theory that a lot of individuals who are opposed to certain interventions that are being pushed on the public right now, I won't say the V word because we'll have a whole different argument on our hands. But there's a lot of people that are awake to that truth that have started looking at what the industry is doing and analyzing it. Fetal bovine tissue that's harvested is harvested while the heart is beating, and DNEs that are allowed, so dismemberment and evacuation is what DNE stands for. Dismemberment and evacuation procedure for an abortion. They use forceps or a suction catheter. And in Orlando, Florida, they're allowed to go out to 22 weeks and 6 days, which is the point at which the baby's nervous system is fully developed. Okay. And they do it without digoxin most of the time, because digoxin will stop the heart before the procedure, and it negatively impacts tissue viability for harvesting. So they do it without.
Wow. That's nuts.
So if we really start to examine this, and again, I'm not trying to turn people against government. I'm not trying to get anybody to do anything except open your eyes.
Think critically.
Think critically, because this comes down to two things. It comes down to, are you going to worship Yahweh, or are you going to worship Baal? And Baal is the Hebrew term for Lord, little l. And in the Israelite culture, it actually could refer to a husband or a boss. And scripturally, it has manifested into other gods. And if you literally divide the word, it says, "Thou shalt not have other gods before me." If we translate that, don't worship Baal. Jesus says, "I'm the only way." And we can take this really deep, dude. I can show you landmarks in New York. There's a reason I haven't talked about New York. And it's because of what we went through when we were out there. And yes, God did amazing things in our trip. But I want to make sure that whenever I talk about that trip and talk about what it is, I'm communicating that to people in a way that, number one, doesn't incite fear, but also a way that they can grasp and they can just kind of have the eyes of their heart enlightened to what's going on around them. Because we are being sold a bill of goods. We are being fed a reality that causes dissent. And I think it's because if they can get the people to turn, then they don't have to pull the construct down if it erodes from the inside. Because the fact is, we've got basically one last stand between us and the enemy. And when the Constitution was written and the government was formed, we were told that we would have a constitutional republic if we could keep it. If you look at why the country was formed the way it is, and religious freedom, specifically Christian religious freedom being paramount on the foundation of the country, and then you go back and you look at what happened with like the Roman Catholic Church, that, you know, in the Dark Ages, and of course Christ took that blame for what people did, and then that gets passed on to Christians, and oh, look at what these people did back here, they're no different. But when we really take the time to look at the history, it's like, that's not what happened at all. People have been deceived. And that doesn't mean turn away from the country that we're a part of, that we love. That means that we need to come together as Christians, believing that our words have power and we can speak and pray this thing into the way that it needs to be, because any country can become Babylon. Any civilization can become Babylon. All it has to do is turn its back on God.
Amen.
Wow.
Sorry.
It's deep stuff. I love it.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's just deep. That's heavy. And again, it's just, golly, we can, you talk the whole indoctrination, or the doctrine of, you know, Roman Catholicism and its historical significance. It's crazy. You know, I'm a recovering Catholic, and I got a lot of people that I love that still adhere to that, but by no means do I believe any of its tenets beyond just man-made manipulation. And, you know, I grew up learning to focus more on guilt and shame in that doctrine than I did fear, than love and compassion and all that. And it wasn't until I really received Christ in my mid-20s and really, I understood it. You know, I went all the way through confirmation until the ceremony. And then I just went, I put the brakes on. And man, did I upset some people. You know, and what's funny is they were the Jack Catholics in my life that only went to church when they were guilty or feeling some sense of internal, you know, conflict. Other than that, it was never a deal. So I learned that it was just a total separate deal, probably in my late teens. And ever since then, I've just tried to see it that way. And it just always separates itself. Every time I think about the word and I think about Christ, I don't see anything in the doctrine that I was raised in being organically true, you know.
Well, and
so,
I'm not
yeah.
to say anything bad about any institution, but I do find it interesting that nobody seems to be talking about society from a perspective of, we are raised to be indoctrinated into programs that teach us to live, act, and think a specific way. And then we're medicating people from a younger and younger age. We take this developmental area where kids are really curious and they're learning about the world and they've got a lot of energy, and we say, you are hyperactive. We're going to bump you down a notch.
Right.
So we're changing things genetically. We're changing things earlier and earlier because our research has gotten us closer to creation. This is nothing new. It's history repeating itself. And it's just, it looks a little bit differently every time. And so we think in our ego, inflated ego, the sense of self, that we've done something, but really all we've done is discovered something that God created. And we're medicating, and then we've got this programming that's in our face all hours of the day so that people can't be single-minded about anything. People can't even drive their freaking car without texting on the cell phone. When rumble strips were invented, that was in case you fall asleep. For like people driving long distances and truck drivers, and or you turn down to change the radio, oop, there's the vibration, right? And so you got the tracks from the machines, but that's a use is for distracted drivers. I don't think they ever intended for them to be used the way that they are now. Because every day on my way to work, I'm watching the cars around me on their cell phone.
It used to be just, a woman putting on lipstick or a guy checking his mail or, looking at his planner or something. But now it's that phone that just can straight up take people's attention undividedly.
Yeah.
Going down the road at 65.
So how are we ever going to have the ability to constructively think or to think rationally if we're constantly in that place of fear and panic and just spun up with adrenaline?
Yeah. I don't know.
Have you ever done a really hard workout? Like when you go into public service, you do proficiency tests, physical agility tests and stuff like that. And one of the things that we'll do is we'll get somebody's heart pumping and get them to their kind of like their max heart rate. And we'll cause them to have to do fine motor functions under a stress state, because if you're in a stressful situation and somebody's life is hanging in the balance, you've got to be able to calm yourself and stop yourself from shaking to thread the IV into the vein. You have to have steady hands to be able to do that, or to intubate.
Breathe it out. Yeah.
And so we'll actually put somebody in that state and then focus their attention and force them to function doing something that they normally wouldn't do in that state. Most people don't get that kind of training. Most people get, here's the stack of papers, Friday evening, it's due Monday. Have a good
one. Exactly.
We got to look at this, man.
Well, and again, I think it's just a conversation starter. I think this is something that, gosh, should be really good to set up something like this where you could, narrow it down. And I mean, it's hard because every one of these topics you could just dive deep into, but to be able to have something of this magnitude, to be able to share it on a more populous level, I think would be huge. That's why, again, I want to advocate what you're doing as well, obviously with the Kangen and this and that, and that's been kind of what's brought us all together. But at the end of the day, it's just helped to identify, things. I'm trying to continually surround myself with people that I feel bring the best out in me, and it's weird because I feel like I've been attacked hardcore. The more I try and stay on that mindset, the more I really believe that I'm attacked, just from simple misunderstandings, to, accusations. And I'm just like, wait a sec, you didn't hear what I said properly. And, someone made a big deal about it in public while we were coaching and blah, blah, blah. And it was another coach coming in, a total misunderstanding, but she just took it and ran with it. And it was crazy, and I'm sitting there, and what did I do? I faced it. I addressed it. I even told the team, hey, look, guys, whenever we're wrong or we're even perceived to being wrong, if we have any sense of self and the ownership, taking ownership of any situation is our responsibility. I could sit there and just act like it never happened, and I could, oh, she's, blah, 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 she didn't hear me right. No, that wasn't it. My objective, once I figured out the misunderstanding a day later after trying to figure it out, because I didn't understand how it went the way it went, I had to own it. I had to deal with it. And I thought it set a good example for the kids, it's never fun when you've got to like say, hey, look, man, something happened and I didn't like the way I responded. And you never like to do that. But at the end of the day, as a mentor, as a person trying to stay consistent with, who I think God wants me to be, even in spite of myself. I mean, particularly in spite of myself. I'm such a fleshly cat. I'm always trying to take that ownership and just giving it to God and understanding that, he can help me get through it if I allow him to. If I don't, and I get into defensiveness and I get into she's full of it and that's all big lie and she blah, 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 her, I'm not getting anything out of it. And I sure as heck ain't setting any type of positive foundation for these kids in terms of how to identify and solve conflicts. It ain't going to the other end of our fences and throwing the bird. It's
Right.
coming to the fence and saying, hey, come on, we're adults. Let's solve this. Let's be mature about this and let's get it out of the way. Let's put it behind us, and that's the same thing, the divorce thing. Geez, it's just constant manipulation, constant made up stuff that just continues to evolve. And I'm not blinking anymore. There was a time where I would nearly lose my mind because it was so absurd in the accusation or in the manipulation of my kids that I would just want to be defensive, protect them, make a big stink about it. At the end of the day, that ain't never what God's ever wanted me to do, because as much as I wanted to, and I was in that heightened state of emotional frenzy, nothing less than prayer and meditation for a few minutes just to gather myself and to try and separate myself from the emotion through prayer and letting go of that and giving it to him. That's the only time that I really can make a rational decision. Or I'm caught up in, again, the emotion, the circumstance, the situation. And with faith, understanding of God's role, it's never about that. It's about the principles that, he's given us with scripture. And again, faith or fear. And I used to, let fear, you were talking about that earlier. I was in a closet one time. I was a little kid. And I've always, ever since then, I'll be 50 on the 31st of this month. And I can't go into a closet. I can, but I laugh at myself. I always kid around, but we came home from a game. We had family there. We had games in this closet in the back room. My cousin wanted me to go get the games. The light was broken in that room, and you had to open up the door this way and then shut it, because then the closet door opened this way. Mm-hmm. So I'm 9. And I go after my dad's like, go get the thing. My cousin kept teasing me, quit being a puss, quit being scared. I tell my little brother, come sit by this door and I will do it, right? Well, I shut the door. It's black in this room. I have to reach up to the handle to open that door that I can't open if the main bedroom door is open. I hear a bunch of shuffling and shifting around in there. I get freaked out. I go to reach back and open the door. I get halfway through it. Whoever was in our closet kicked the door open, and it wedged me in the door. Like I felt like the guy on Alien where he got cut in half, and he was just kind of upper torso. That's where I was pinched off. And I remember just screaming bloody murder. Someone was in our house. Someone was in there. The next morning, then you find a knife with the knuckles hooked into, there's like indentations for the knuckles in this kind of curved blade. Thank God there was no light in that room, because he dropped that in there. We didn't find that till the next morning. But again, that conditioning, that programming, that freaked me out. Now I've learned to just kind of make a little more fun with it and just be like, all right, get out of my head, turn on this closet light, especially at a stranger's or someone else's house or, wherever. If I'm just doing something, not that I'm digging around other people's closets, but when you open up a door and you don't know what's behind it or, whatever, it's just, that's my thoughts. And I've always had to kind of conscientiously steer myself out of that mindset because it can just consume you. And it just fear begets more fear and anxiety, and it just, your thoughts become your, behaviors, and your behaviors become your actions. And I just never really been one to want to live in fear. And the only way I've ever really been able to relieve that is just faith that no matter what the situation is, God can get me through it if I just lean on him and if I just trust him. And maybe that's a little too lengthy or whatever, but that's the point I'm trying to make based on my circumstance, is just being able to, through God, remedy that with absolute faith, that even if it doesn't change the situation, it gives me a greater sense of insight as to how to maintain myself in said situation. So, yeah.
You're doing what you're supposed to do in that situation. You're turning it back. Familiar mistakes will get us every time, man. All right. Hey, so we got JJ's internet went out, and he said that we kept recording. I'm going to share something with you that I think you would benefit from. It's an app for our church. So
nice.
I'll send that to you. You can access it on your phone, and
okay.
Let me know what you think.
I will. Hey, bud, I appreciate you big time. Look forward to dialing in with you on a personal level, directly, I should say. In the meanwhile, hey, it's fun to just dial in with you when you get into these Kong shows, and just gracious enough to share with what you're learning. And I really want to help advocate and spread your message. I think you're onto something. I think we're onto something with the water you start plugging in. The way I look at it is, I look at the water is about sticks. Water is the foundation. Everything else on top of that is the sticks to build whatever we're building. But that's how I see it. And I love the sticks that you're putting up on your house, so to speak, and I kind of want to learn how to build my house the same. You know what I'm talking about? All right, bud. Well, yeah, rock and roll.
All right.
Send that to me. I look forward to it.
Yeah, I'll text you.
All right, bud. Giddy up.